Did you know, Richard, misunderstanding market needs can sink a startup?
Is that so, Riley? Can you share more on that?
Absolutely. Picture this. Startups, fueled with enthusiasm and a vision to revolutionize something, however, often forget one critical element: the market's actual need.
You mean entrepreneurs being so engrossed in their vision they ignore market realities?
Correct. They end up building something that the market doesn't actually need or want. Rather than a revolutionary product, it becomes a costly mistake.
So does this happen often?
Unfortunately, yes. The number of tech products that have been built and failed just because there was no actual market demand is staggering. You may think it's fiction, but it's a reality many enthusiastic entrepreneurs face.
Wow, there's a harsh reality check there. So what can startups do differently to avoid this?
Well, one effective approach is to ensure an in-depth understanding of the market. Accessibility to potential customers, their preferences, spending habits. Startups should aim to answer these questions before approaching the product design and development process.
Sound advice for all our budding entrepreneurs. I hope they're taking notes.
A case in point is gourmet food delivery app Spoon Rocket. While their vision of delivering affordable gourmet meals was appealing, they failed to grasp that their market mostly consisted of budget-conscious students and working professionals who preferred lower-cost, familiar food options.
So despite having a good product, they couldn't keep afloat because their target customer base didn't value the solution they were offering as much.
Exactly. If Spoon Rocket had maybe started out offering lower-cost food options based on market research, they might have stayed in business.
Got it. And another startup that comes to mind is treacherous, remember that?
Ah, the $400 juicer. Hard to forget that. Do you think their pricing played a role in their downfall?
Unquestionably, their product was too expensive for the mass market. They failed to understand that their core customers were health-conscientious individuals who most likely already had a less expensive juicing option at home.
So, it all boils down to understanding what the market wants, not just what we believe they should want.
Even if the product is revolutionary, if there's no market demand, it's bound for failure.
And this is why market research isn't just an optional step. It's essential to startup survival.
Probably often overlooked in the race of launch. But honestly, if these entrepreneurs had understood their markets better, do you think it might have changed their fate?
Well, no one can say for sure, but understanding your market and adapting to it is key to staying afloat. So it's not just enough to understand your market, but to continuously gauge its needs and adapt accordingly. How can startups do that?
Interesting point, Riley. I believe, first of all, startups need to have direct communication with their customers. Hear them out. Understand what they need, feel, and want. There is a wealth of information in direct customer feedback.
That's right. But gathering feedback isn't just about asking the right questions and getting answers. It's also about interpreting those answers correctly. We need to recognize what the customers are saying, even when they are not saying it directly.
That's insightful, Riley. And of course, startups shouldn't limit themselves to their current customers. They need to understand their non-buyers too. Why are they not buying? What other alternatives do they have? What could make them switch?
And that cannot be a one-time process. Market trends change, customer preferences evolve. Being in touch with your customers is like having a pulse on your market.
Very true. Adaptability is key. Markets are not static, and neither should startups be. Companies that quickly adapt to market changes stand a better chance of surviving and thriving. It's as simple, yet challenging as that.
So stay humble, stay hungry, keep the communication channels wide open, and keep an eye on the currents flowing through the market. Sounds simple, right?
That's a good summary, Riley. And remember, it's a dynamic process. And there's always some trial and error involved. Nobody gets it right from day one. The key is to learn from these experiences and keep improving.
Let's delve into flawed business models now. They've caused some epic crashes in the startup world, haven't they, Richard?
Absolutely, Riley. And often these flaws can be traced back to lack of planning or downright delusion. For instance, it's surprising the number of businesses that start off thinking they don't need to make a profit because they'll make up for it in volume. That's not how the math works.
I see. So what's your advice to avoid this pitfall?
Well, Understanding your costs and creating a financially feasible plan is crucial. I've seen startups with great ideas buckle under the pressure of unrealistic financial expectations.
Interesting. And how about the inflexibility factor? I assume that stubbornly sticking to an unworkable model is not a great idea either.
You're absolutely correct, Riley. Companies, especially startups, need to have the agility to pivot when they realize their current business model is not sustainable. Take my experience at the amusement park, for example. We couldn't compete with the franchise parks on its size, but we could compete in the unique feel and keeping the nostalgic value alive for locals. We needed to pivot, adjust, adapt.
Got it. A successful startup then, by definition, needs to be flexible and adapt to market changes. Thanks for the insights, Richard. Richard, in your experience, could you give our listeners an idea of the process involved in developing a robust business model?
That's quite a loaded question, Riley. You see, developing a business model isn't a one-and-done deal. It's a dynamic process. Startups need to have a clear vision of what they want to provide and how they plan to make money from it. But here's the thing. They can't be rigid about it. Market needs often shift rapidly, and startups need to be ready to adjust their model accordingly.
Adjust. Now that's something I've been great at during my stint as a security guard. Always having to think on my feet, you know. Can you shed some more light on how startups can align their business models with evolving market needs?
Indeed, adaptability is key here, just as it is in your line of work, Riley. For startups, this could involve modifying their product if they find it's not meeting their customers' demands, or perhaps adjusting their pricing strategy if they discover the market won't bear their initial prices. The point is, they need to be regularly assessing their environment and making tactical changes to their business model. It's more about survival than sticking to a prefixed plan.
I've seen great teams fall apart because of disagreements. In your viewpoint, Richard, what causes these team conflicts in startups?
From my experience, Riley, diverging visions can be a major reason. If all the co-founders aren't aligned on the startup's goal, conflicts are bound to rise. Imagine designing an amusement ride, and one person wants a roller coaster, while another wants a carousel. The disagreement can lead to a breakdown of team dynamics.
Oh, I can only imagine. It's just like over at Hyundai, where different security teams hold different views on how to approach situations, leading to clashes. If this happens in the domain of a startup, that should spell an utter disaster, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, Riley. In a startup, where you're already dealing with uncertain markets and cash-strapped situations, internal discord can push it to failure's edge.
So what can startups do to prevent this?
Having a clear, shared vision from the get-go and fostering open communication within the team are key. And if disagreements do arise, they should resolve them with empathy and understanding. Mutual respect in the team is as vital as the oxygen they breathe.
I can't stress enough how important that is. I've seen it firsthand when policing at Hyundai how stellar teamwork can diffuse many high-pressure situations. That must hold true for startups as well. Richard, diversity can play a crucial part in successful startups. It brings different ideas and perspectives, but it can also cause friction. How can a startup channel this diversity constructively?
True, Riley. It's all about how you, as a team, manage that diversity. One common practice seen in successful teams is the creation of a positive team culture. By setting up ground rules from the start that encourage open dialogue and respect for everyone's ideas, the team can mitigate potential friction. It's like the intricacies involved in managing my diverse team of ride operators at Luna Park, where every individual has his or her strengths. We work together as a cohesive unit by acknowledging these strengths.
Ground rules, so like respecting each other even if disagreements arise?
Right. Disagreements aren't bad and are often instrumental in breakthroughs, but they can cause harm when not handled correctly. Startups should ensure they have processes in place to resolve conflicts as they arise. Maybe consider hiring a team mediator or providing conflict resolution training. It's about creating a safe environment where everyone feels they can voice their opinions and disagreements freely.
I can see how that's important. But any other strategies startups can implement to effectively manage their teams?
One often overlooked factor is celebrating small victories. Acknowledging even minor achievements can strengthen team bonds and foster a culture of recognition and appreciation. This could be as simple as congratulating a team member for a well-delivered presentation or for successfully clinching a deal. It can greatly impact morale and productivity, as I've seen at Luna Park.
Richard, a prospect that intimidates me when thinking about starting a venture is running out of capital. It's an unfortunate reason many startups fail, isn't it?
Absolutely, Riley. Over my bartender shifts, I've heard stories of startups running dry, despite promising ideas and strong teams. Venture capital might pour in at first, but if you don't adequately control your burn rate or have a plan for sustainable cash flow, your dream can turn into ashes real quick.
That can happen even if the startup has a tangible product and a passionate team, right?
Yes, that's why it's crucial to have a detailed financial plan from the get-go. Startups need to understand their cost structures, revenue models, and have a keen eye on their liquidity. They need to balance the scales of ambitious growth and cautious spending.
How can startups prevent such a pitfall? What practical advice would you offer?
Lean operation is key, Riley. Minimize unnecessary overheads and focus spending on activities directly creating value. Explore affordable options for non-core functions like outsourcing or automating tasks. Keep your fixed costs low while ramping up growth and be nimble on your feet.
Sound advice, Richard. Essentially, being judicious with spending is critical. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners.
We've seen how startups can run out of capital, but how can they navigate the financial landscape to prevent that, Riley?
Well, it all starts with sound financial planning. Drafting a detailed business model with realistic revenue projections and expected costs is critical. Map out multiple scenarios to prepare for unexpected roadblocks. This can alleviate the fear of money running out unexpectedly and provide a roadmap to follow.
Sounds a lot like setting up a new ride at Luna Park. You have to consider different elements and anticipate every potential issue. It's important to be resourceful and adaptive, right?
Exactly, Richard. Resources are finite, and startups should prioritize spending on value-adding activities. It might mean tightening the belt in initial stages with a focus on long-term gain. For starters, bootstrapping or constraining the use of resources can work wonders in making every penny count.
How about fundraising? Isn't that an important aspect too?
True, Richard. Fundraising can be tricky. Entrepreneurs need to validate their ideas and have a robust business plan to attract investors. It's all about balancing the scales of showing promise and building confidence. But remember, the journey doesn't end at securing the funds. Effective capital allocation remains key to ensure survival.
So startups must navigate through all these challenges and be prudent about their financial decisions. The roller coaster ride indeed. Riley, how does competitiveness play into success or failure for startups?
Oh, it's a major driving force, Richard. An intensely competitive market can be a double-edged sword. It can stimulate innovation, but it can also kick startups out of the race if not handled well.
I can see that, just like having several similar ride attractions in close proximity. So what's the solution?
A unique selling proposition or USP is crucial. It's that X factor which sets a startup apart from its competitors. It can be an innovative product feature, superior customer service, or even pricing. When startups fail to distinguish themselves, they inevitably become overshadowed.
Just like our fastest roller coaster, the Lunar Thunderbolt. If that weren't unique, customers wouldn't be lining up.
Right. And strategic competitiveness is just as vital. Startups need to find their niche and continuously adapt to keep their edge. That could mean redefining business goals, revising pricing strategies, or even pivoting the product or service itself.
Sounds like adaptability is a key factor in remaining competitive. I suppose complacency has no place in such a fast-paced environment.
Absolutely. Continuous monitoring of market trends and competitor activities is paramount. The ability to adapt and reshape based on the market climate could be the defining aspect between a startup that thrives and one that crumbles. Richard, you mentioned the Luna Thunderbolt earlier. Why do you think it pulls such a crowd?
Riley, it's all in the uniqueness. It's the fastest roller coaster we have, and that's its USP. It draws thrill seekers who crave the mix of speed and excitement it offers.
And how does Luna Park maintain that edge?
Continual innovation, Riley. We constantly carry out repairs and enhancements to ensure the roller coaster stays unique and exciting for riders. If not, it loses its appeal.
So, would you say that's true for startups as well? To stand tall in a crowded market, should they continuously innovate without losing sight of their USP?
Yes, definitely. Startups need to be cautious about getting caught in the tide of innovation and losing sight of what their product or service originally set out to do, their value to the customer.
Emphasizing on their USP then? But what about in a fast-paced environment, say, like the tech industry where change happens rapidly?
Great question. It's all about balance. Startups need to innovate, yes, but also ensure that any changes align with their core values and are something their target audience would appreciate. It's like tweaking the roller coaster. We can't just change it completely because people come for the thrill of its speed. Similarly, startups need to meet market demands and hold on to their USP. Ignoring customer feedback, it's like skipping over potholes on a road trip. They may not seem important at the time, but ignore them long enough and they'll damage your car beyond repair.
It's that kind of we-know-better arrogance that has sunk so many startups, right?
Exactly, Riley. Let me tell you about one startup I've come across. They were heavily tech-focused, making cutting-edge products that were like nothing else on the market. But they never interacted with their customers, using feedback channels. They thought they knew exactly what the market wanted, and their products were going to crush the competition.
What happened then?
Sales were initially great, but gradually they started to drop. The customers were unhappy. They needed certain technical support that the products lacked. They communicated their grievances, suggested improvements. But the startup, wrapped up in their own vision, dismissed what the customers were saying. They thought their tech was far superior to what the customers needed.
I've seen this sort of thing in the retail industry too. The company thinks they have the best product, the one that everyone will love. But they forget that it's not about them, it's about the customer. If the customer doesn't like it, doesn't find it useful, they're not going to buy it. It doesn't matter how revolutionary it is.
That's right, Riley. And this startup I mentioned, guess what? They went bankrupt within a few months. All because they didn't pay attention to customer feedback. Could they have avoided it? Probably. Would they have had to change their products? A little bit, probably. But refusing to adapt to customer feedback was their undoing.
So the lesson from these stories?
Pay attention to your customers. Listen to them. Understand their needs. Because they can make or break your business.
Looks like we've established how crucial customer feedback is. But how should startups practically go about collecting and implementing this feedback? It's not as simple as setting up a suggestion box.
True, Riley. It's vital to create an open communication channel where customers feel comfortable expressing their opinions. If we take my theme park experience, for instance, we implement feedback forms for the different rides and even have a face-to-face feedback system at the exit. It's about making your customers feel heard.
Absolutely, Richard. And how does a startup ensure they're not just collecting feedback but also implementing it in a productive manner?
It requires a systematic process. First, categorizing the feedback is crucial, as it would help identify patterns. Maybe customers aren't happy with your app's interface or the payment process. Once you have them categorized, you can have your team focus on the most recurrent issues.
But isn't there a risk of being too influenced by customer feedback? They say too many cooks spoil the broth. Can having too many opinions derail a startup's main vision?
Good point, Riley. But that's where maintaining a fine balance is essential. Your customers' needs should become your goals, but they shouldn't dictate your vision. It's about taking their feedback, recognizing trends and implementing changes that align with your vision and growth strategy.
So, Richard, about creating a customer-centric culture, how exactly does that happen?
It starts with genuinely caring for your customers' needs and their experience with your product or service. Once your startup has this inherent culture, respecting and addressing customer feedback becomes a natural extension of that.
Let's discuss product mistiming. Richard, remember hearing about that much-hyped tech gadget a few years ago that ended up being a massive failure because it launched at the same time as another giant's product? How can startups navigate through such tricky waters?
Oh, I remember that one. Quite a heartbreaking story. Timing your product launch is as tricky as tightrope walking. One misstep, and you might end up in the startup graveyard. Not all startups can afford to compete head-on with industry giants, especially when they debut their products simultaneously. It's like organizing a local fun fair the same day Disneyland announces a massive reduction on entry tickets. You will be overshadowed even if your product is top-notch.
And on the flip side, there are countless tales of startups that rushed their product launches without adequately testing or fine-tuning. Is there a way to determine the right time to launch a product?
Well, Riley, understanding market trends, consumer behavior, and competition are all critical. But there's no one-size-fits-all answer to this. It involves a careful analysis of multiple elements, including your unique selling proposition, readiness of the market for your product, and your startup's capacity to deal with potential setbacks.
True, Richard. Although it's a complex process, being aware of potential pitfalls can help startups chart a safer course. Right timing can be the difference between booming success and being crushed under competition. Perhaps hosting a competitive analysis workshop or partnering with experienced market strategists can assist in the process. Given the volatility of our startup ecosystem, what's your take on mitigating the risk of product mistiming?
I think it boils down to drawing insights from case studies and learning from others' experiences. Be it my amusement park dream or that tech gadget fiasco, timing plays a crucial role. Startups should indeed strive for a well-planned launch, but also prepare for the aftermath. After all, the real battle starts after your product hits the market.
To avoid pitfalls like product mistiming, understanding market trends is imperative, and that's something we can all learn irrespective of our industries. Richard, how can startups in your line of work apply this advice?
In the entertainment industry, we almost always witness a surge in demand during holiday seasons. That's a market trend. If I were to launch a new ride or attraction in my amusement park, that's the time I'd target. But it's critical to interpret these patterns in conjunction with other factors such as weather conditions, competitor activities, and of course, my own capacity constraints. Co-developing multiple attractions might seem attractive, but it can lead to catastrophic cash crunches if not managed well.
Learning from patterns and effectively applying them is an art in itself. And it's not confined to product launches alone, it's an ongoing process that continues much after the product hits the market. How do you think startups should maneuver post-launch?
Well, the job certainly doesn't end at launch. Startups need to continually monitor customer responses, market trends, and competitive activities. Being able to pivot and adapt quickly to changes can often be the saving grace. It's a risky ride, but with careful attention to surround sound, it can definitely be managed better. I'd advise not to be afraid to iterate and pivot. Adequacy should not be compromised for the sake of staying on schedule.